They say the cold teaches you to feel things deeper. Maybe it's because when everything is stripped away, the warmth, the comfort, the noise, all you're left with is what hurts the most. Freya never liked the snow. Even as a child, she'd bury herself beneath straw and furs, trembling as the wind howled through the cracks in her family's rotting longhouse. Now, at 17, the cold still found her, only now it bit deeper, like it knew exactly where to pierce. This morning, she had to bury her last hen. The others were taken one by one over the winter. A fox, perhaps. Or hunger. Or worse. She knelt beside the tiny, lifeless body, her fingers stiff and raw, and whispered a prayer she wasn't sure anyone still listened to. Not the white-cloaked gods of the new faith, and not the old ones either. Not anymore. Still, she spoke to the wind, because it was the only thing that ever answered back. Her mother had died 2 winters ago, leaving Freya with a sickly younger brother, a collapsed roof, and a debt to a chieftain who had forgotten her name. Her father? A fisherman who'd gone out one morning and never came back, likely claimed by the sea or by raiders. Or, again, something worse. In the village of Irfjall, worse always seemed just around the corner. They lived in the outer edge of the settlement now, she and her brother, Leif, in a shack once used to store grain, its walls warped and blackened by frost. Every day was the same, barter fish for root vegetables, patch the leaks, pray the chieftain's tax collectors didn't notice how little she had left. But something had changed this winter. It started with the dreams. At first, vague and misty, like a memory she didn't own. Then they sharpened, a dark tree on a hill, wolves with human eyes, a shadow slipping through the woods wearing her father's face. She never told Leif. He was only 10, and barely clinging to what little childhood the world allowed him. Instead, she confided in Bjorn. Bjorn was older, 19, the blacksmith's apprentice, and the only person in Irfjall who didn't look at her with either pity or disdain. He had hands rough as bark, eyes soft as the twilight over the fjords, and a way of listening that made her feel real again. "You're not mad," he'd said one afternoon, sitting beside her at the edge of the frozen river. "Lots of folks hear things. It's just the mountain." "The mountain doesn't whisper my name," Freya had replied, eyes fixed on the reflection of snow-dusted pines. Bjorn had frowned, brushing snow from her shoulder. "Stay close to the village at night. And don't follow the voices." That was a week ago. Since then, the signs had grown stronger. She'd found strange symbols etched into the trees behind her shack. Not runes. Something older, more primitive. Carved deep, like they were meant to last through the end of the world. Then there was the smell, wet soil and iron, that lingered near her door each morning. And last night, the dreams returned with such force that she awoke screaming, convinced something had crawled into her bed and whispered in her ear. But tonight there were no dreams. There was only silence. And a knock at the door. 3 soft taps. Then nothing. Freya sat up slowly, heart hammering in her chest. Leif stirred beside her, but did not wake. She pulled the fur blanket tighter around his small frame and stepped barefoot across the creaking floor. Another knock. Louder this time. Then, a voice. Freya. Her father's voice. She froze. The door was just a thin plank of pine, barely holding back the cold, or whatever stood beyond it. That voice was wrong. Too slow, too deep. Like someone mimicking speech from a forgotten memory. She backed away. "You're dead." "I came back," the voice replied. Freya reached for the rusted blade near the hearth. Her fingers trembled, not from the cold this time, but from something older, deeper, a dread that settled in her bones like winter itself. "You're not him," she whispered. The voice didn't respond. Then came the scratching, faint at first, like claws tracing wood, then louder. Faster. As if something was tearing through the door with purpose. Leaf woke with a start. "Freya?" She turned, trying to sound calm. "Stay in bed. Don't move." He stared at the door, eyes wide with fear. "Is it Papa?" She shook her head. No, the scratching stopped. Silence again. Then, footsteps. Not fading away. Circling the house. Freya moved quickly, grabbed the lantern, and signaled through the back slat, the one Bjorn had helped carve months ago in case they ever needed to escape. She saw nothing but snow and shadow. Then movement. A figure, watching from beyond the trees. "Bjorn." He raised a hand. Before she could speak, the front door burst inward with a sound like thunder. Leaf screamed. And Freya saw it, the thing that wore her father's face. Only it wasn't flesh. It was cold, the shape of memory and bone and darkness, with hollow eyes that bled lightless fog. She grabbed Leaf and ran for the back, Bjorn already charging toward them with an axe in hand. The thing howled, not like a man. Like something pulled from beneath the ice. Something forgotten. As they escaped into the woods, Freya dared one last glance over her shoulder. The creature didn't follow. It stood at the threshold of her home, staring after her with something like sorrow. And then it whispered again, so soft she almost missed it. "You called me." The fire crackled in the cave's belly, casting long shadows across the rock walls. Freya sat hunched near the flames, her brother fast asleep beside her, wrapped in the same fur they had shared since their mother died. Bjorn fed the fire in silence, his brow furrowed. They hadn't spoken much since they fled. Whatever that thing was, wearing her father's voice, standing at her door, it hadn't followed them. But its presence clung to her like wet smoke. "You saw it too," Freya said, finally breaking the silence. Bjorn didn't answer right away. Then, a changeling spirit. Or worse. "I've heard tales. Nothing like this." Freya pulled her knees to her chest. "It knew me. It remembered my name." Bjorn looked at her carefully. "That thing wasn't your father. But maybe it used to be." She didn't know what that meant, not really. But deep inside, she felt the truth of it. In the morning, they climbed deeper into the valley, away from the village and into the forgotten forest, a place most villagers refused to speak of. The elders called it the Sleeping Wood, where the old gods still listened, and sometimes whispered back. Bjorn led them to an ancient spring, its waters clear and silent, like glass poured from the sky. A ring of stones circled it, not placed by hands, but shaped that way by time, or something older. Freya noticed something as she stepped closer, a soft hum in her bones, a thrumming like a heartbeat under the earth. Leaf stayed back, silent and uneasy. Then, the water rippled. A figure emerged, not walking, not swimming, but rising like fog. It shimmered part woman, part sea, draped in barnacles and moonlight, hair flowing like kelp in a hidden tide. Freya froze. "What is that?" Bjorn bowed slightly. "She's called Dalise. A river spirit. Shokoi, or something near enough." The creature's eyes were vast and old, reflecting the winter sky. She spoke without moving her mouth, her voice soft, inside Freya's mind. You are blood of the drowned. You are not supposed to be here yet. Freya's lips parted, but no words came. Dalice's gaze turned toward the girl's hands, and in that moment, something warm pulsed beneath Freya's sleeve. She pulled back the cloth, revealing a shell-shaped pendant she hadn't worn in years. Her mother's. A kabibi, polished smooth, carved with a spiral symbol she'd never been able to understand. The pendant glowed softly. I thought this was just a trinket, she whispered. Dalice's tone deepened. It is a mutia. A piece of something once whole. Once lost. It remembers your blood. Freya stared at it, heart pounding. Your mother was marked, the Shokoi said. So are you. The thing that came to your door is only the beginning. The cold ones stir, and the hunger returns. Bjorn stepped closer. She needs to understand. What are the cold ones? Dalice turned toward him, and for a brief moment, the temperature dropped. Even the flames of Bjorn's torch dimmed. We call them aswang, she said. But they are not all the same. Some wear the faces of loved ones. Others are shadows that feast on breath. Your bloodline has long bound them. Long fed them. Freya's fingers tightened around the mutia. My mother never spoke of this, she said. She was normal. Dalice's gaze softened, or as much as something ancient and made of salt could soften. She hid you well. But the curse was never lifted. Only sleeping. And now, it wakes. The spirit reached into the spring. From the water, she pulled a small, twisted fragment of metal, shaped like a broken spearhead, etched in the same spiral as the pendant. She held it out, and it hovered for a moment before floating into Freya's hands. This is part of the blade that sealed the hunger long ago. It has chosen you. Freya shook her head. I don't want to be chosen. The mutia pulsed again, once, like a heartbeat. Dalice's voice faded, echoing like waves retreating from shore. Then you must choose to run, or fight. Either way, the cold will come. And with that, the spirit sank back into the water, leaving only ripples behind. They walked for hours after, back into the forest's edge. The weight of the mutia and the broken blade fragment pressed heavily in Freya's satchel. She kept touching them, hoping they would stop glowing, hoping all of it had been some strange dream. I can't do this, she muttered, finally. I'm not my mother. I'm not, whatever that thing thinks I am. Bjorn didn't reply right away. He walked beside her, axe in hand, his gaze alert. You don't have to believe it, he said. But that doesn't mean it's not real. She clenched her fists. I just want to keep Leaf safe. And you will, Bjorn said. But maybe that means being more than just a sister. Freya stopped walking. Do you believe the aswangs are real? He turned, looked her straight in the eye. I've seen a man lose his shadow. I've heard my own name called by someone buried in the ground. And now I've watched a spirit rise from water and give you a glowing shell. A long breath. Yeah. I believe. That night, they found shelter in a half-collapsed longhouse near the edge of the old fields. Freya took first watch, sitting by the boarded window while Leaf slept soundly, and Bjorn leaned against the far wall, half drifting. The wind whispered through the cracks. But this time, it wasn't the wind. Something moved outside. She stood slowly, pressing her back to the wall. The mutia around her neck grew warm again. Then a flicker, just beyond the frame of the window. Eyes. Bright. Animal. But not. And a mouth too wide, too sharp. And a swang. It grinned. Freya gasped and stumbled back. Bjorn jerked awake, gripping his axe. Leaf stirred. But when she looked again, the window was empty. She backed away, heart racing, hands shaking. On the windowsill, carved freshly into the wood, was a spiral. The same symbol on the mutia. But this one was bleeding. The spiral didn't stop bleeding. Freya stared at it, heart thudding, as the crimson trail soaked into the wood grain. It wasn't just a marking, it was a warning. Bjorn rushed to her side, axe in hand, but whatever had stood outside the window was gone. Only the snow remembered, crusted in strange tracks that disappeared into the trees. Leaf stirred again, murmuring in his sleep. Freya pulled the fur blanket tighter around him, brushing sweat from his brow. His skin was too warm. Feverish. She turned to Bjorn. It saw us. It marked us. He looked grim. No, it marked you. She clenched her fists, her knuckles pale. I didn't ask for this. Bjorn nodded. That doesn't matter anymore. At dawn, they headed east, where the hills turned jagged and old. Bjorn said an old albulario lived in the cliffs, someone who might know more about the mutia, about the blade fragment, about how to break a curse. The trail was narrow and steep. The wind moaned through the ravines, carrying voices that weren't theirs. Freya gripped her pendant tighter, her thoughts a storm. Why her? Her mother had never told her anything. No warnings. No stories. Just silence and warmth and lullabies in the dark. But she remembered now, flashes. Whispers her mother had once spoken when she thought Freya slept. The cold is hungry. I must keep her warm. Forgive me. Had her mother known? Had she chosen to leave her daughter blind to the danger? Betrayal coiled deep in her chest like a knot of ice. That night, they camped in a dry hollow beneath overhanging stone. The fire sputtered and snapped, unable to chase the chill. Freya stared into the flames, the mutia glowing faintly against her chest. Bjorn dozed with one eye open, always listening. Then, she heard it. Scratching. Not from the trees or the snow, but beneath her. The earth moved. She scrambled back just as a hand, thin, gray, clawed, pushed through the soil. It wasn't trying to grab her. It was feeling. Searching. Bjorn leapt up, swinging his axe down hard. The hand retracted with a shriek that didn't come from a throat. The dirt sealed over again, leaving no sign it had ever been disturbed. Freya stood trembling, sweat cold on her brow. What was that? She asked, voice hoarse. Bjorn's face was pale. The ground remembers. Freya looked down at her feet, and this time, she saw them as spirals, carved faintly into the earth around her sleeping spot. They hadn't been there before. The cliffs came into view at midday. The albulario's cave was hidden by a curtain of woven grass and bones. It clattered faintly as they entered. The man inside was impossibly old. His skin was leathered like bark, his eyes pale and blind. But when Freya entered, he turned to her unerringly. You wear the sea's eye, he rasped. You carry the hunger's echo. Bjorn helped Leif into a bed of woven mats. The boy's fever had worsened, his lips dry, his breath shallow. The old man reached out, his bony fingers brushing the pendant around Freya's neck. It should have been broken long ago. Why wasn't it? Freya asked. Because your mother loved you too much. The words landed like stones. She knew what you were. Knew the cost. But she couldn't let go. She bound the curse inside you. Wrapped it in songs. Kept the cold from waking. Freya's breath caught in her throat. So this is my fault? The albulario shook his head slowly. No. It is your inheritance. He turned toward the cave wall, where drawings in ash and ochre covered the stone, spirals, wolves, a woman standing beneath a bleeding tree. The aswangs are not just beasts. They are cursed memories. Old wounds that hunger for warmth, for blood. They follow the spiral's call. Bjorn asked quietly, "Can it be stopped?" The albulario reached into a sack and drew out a small blade, jagged and dark like obsidian, wrapped in dried leaves. This belongs to her now. But it is incomplete. He held out the blade toward Freya, and when she touched it, the mutia flared. The fragment she carried snapped to it like a magnet, fusing, glowing. Freya recoiled. I can't. I'm not a warrior. The old man's blind eyes bore into her. Then you must become something else. That night, Freya sat alone outside the cave, her breath fogging in the air. She watched the moon rise over the cliffs, her hands tied around the newly joined blade. It hummed in her grip like it remembered killing. You carry the hunger's echo. She thought of her mother. Of lullabies and warm hands. Of never being told the truth. She thought of Leaf, dying slowly inside. Of the thing that wore her father's face. And of the hand clawing through the dirt. She wanted to scream. But instead, she whispered, I don't know who I am. The wind answered, soft and cruel, you're what remains. In the final hours before dawn, the cave grew silent. Too silent. Freya rose and stepped inside, eyes darting. Bjorn was still at the mouth of the cave, standing guard. But Leaf. He was gone. The mats were empty, cold. A trail of wet footprints led deeper into the tunnel beyond. She followed them, heart pounding, blade drawn. The air turned thick, damp. The tunnel narrowed. Then she saw him, Leaf. Standing still, barefoot, facing the stone wall. Leaf? He didn't turn. She stepped closer. Then she saw it, the thing clinging to the ceiling above him. Long limbs, slick and gray. Eyes glowing faintly. A mouth like a split-open fish, teeth too many to count. It stared down at her. Then whispered in her mother's voice, you should have stayed asleep. Leaf was cold when she reached him. Not from the mountain air, but from something deeper, something draining the heat from inside him. Freya lunged and pulled him back just as the thing on the ceiling let go, dropping silently to the ground with a wet thud. Its limbs moved like mist, long and boneless. Its eyes shimmered with reflected firelight, and its voice, still her mother's, was wrong in a way that twisted something in her chest. He's almost ready. Like you were. Bjorn appeared behind her, axe drawn, teeth bared. Back, he shouted. Or I'll split you in two. The creature tilted its head. Smiled. And melted backward into the stone, vanishing like breath in winter air. They carried Leaf back to the fire. The boy stirred but didn't wake, muttering words in a language he had never spoken before. The old albulario murmured over him, tracing ash across the boy's forehead. Freya sat apart, clutching the blade in her lap. The mutia at her neck pulsed like a second heart. "It's close," she whispered. "It's watching us." Bjorn tossed another branch onto the fire, his jaw tight. "Then let it come." But Freya didn't answer. She was listening to something else now, a whisper curled deep inside her mind. "You're not ready. You'll lose him too." The next morning, the sky was iron gray. Wind swept down from the cliffs, bringing with it the scent of ash and brine. Freya woke from uneasy sleep, her dreams thick with spirals, with voices calling her name in 1,000 tones, her mother, her father, her own voice split and echoing. In one dream, she stood in the middle of the frozen sea. The ice beneath her feet was carved with hundreds of symbols, spirals, eyes, bleeding trees. She looked down. And beneath the ice, hundreds of faces stared back. Aswangs. Waiting. Bjorn was sharpening his axe when she emerged. He looked tired. Thinner. "You didn't sleep either," she said. He shook his head. "Not since that night we left the village." She sat beside him, the silence stretching between them. "I think my mother loved me," she said. "But she also cursed me." Bjorn paused. "She was trying to protect you. And in doing so, made me too weak to stop this." He sighed. "You think being protected makes you weak?" She didn't answer. A long silence. Then Bjorn said, "I've known fear, Freya. And I've known monsters. But the worst thing I've ever faced is helplessness. Watching someone I care about suffer, and not being able to stop it." He looked at her then. "You're not helpless. You're angry. And scared. That's different." Freya stared at the mountains beyond. "I just don't know if I'm enough." Later that day, they reached the hollow. A bowl of land hidden between cliffs and snow-draped pines, where the old stories said the cold ones were first bound. Even the trees leaned away from it. The air was wrong here, thick with a quiet that pressed against the skin. In the center stood a stone arch, half buried in snow, carved with spiral symbols and ancient runes. The albularia whispered behind them, "That gate has not opened in 100 years." Freya stepped forward. "But it's opening now, isn't it?" The old man nodded. "The hunger grows. Soon, it will spill across the valley. If the gate opens fully, no fire will keep them out." Bjorn set Leaf down on a warm bed of pine needles, arranging furs around him. The boy hadn't stirred all day. Freya knelt beside him. "I have to go inside." Bjorn touched her shoulder. "Not alone." She shook her head. "This is my burden. My family's curse." Bjorn didn't let go. "Then let me carry some of it. You don't always have to be alone in the dark." She stared at him, the hurt and guilt in her chest crashing like a tide. And for a moment, she believed him. They entered the gate at dusk. Inside was a tunnel carved from black stone, slick with moisture and frost. Strange echoes came from deep within, dripping water, whispering wind, and something else. A rhythm. Like breathing. Or chewing. As they walked, Freya's thoughts spiraled, her mother's silence, her own failure to protect Leaf, the voice of the aswang whispering in her sleep. "You're just like us. You devour everything you love." Bjorn led with the torch. The blade in Freya's hand grew warm. Then the tunnel opened into a vast cavern. And there, in the center, was a tree made of bone. Its roots twisted through the rock, its trunk pale and dry, covered in faces frozen in silent screams. And hanging from its branches were people. Some still moved. Some had her eyes. Freya fell to her knees. What is this place? Bjorn swallowed hard. This is where the cold ones feed. Then the ground trembled. From behind the tree, they came, dozens of aswangs, slithering, crawling, walking like broken shadows. Eyes glowing. Mouths wide. And in front of them all, her mother's face. Wearing the same braid. The same necklace. But her eyes were black. My daughter, the creature said. You made it. Freya stood, heart-shattering. You're not her. The thing smiled. But I remember her. I remember you. I remember every lullaby. Every time she held you, afraid you'd be taken. Every moment of doubt. Bjorn stepped forward. She's not alone. The creature laughed, its voice like a winter storm. She's always been alone. Even now. The aswangs moved closer. The blade in Freya's hand flared white-hot. And inside her mind, a voice, not her mother's, not the cold one's, but her own, rose like fire. You're not what they made you. Freya raised the blade. Her fear still lived. Her pain still ached. But her hands no longer trembled. Not because she was ready, but because she had to be. The blade in Freya's hand pulsed with warmth, a strange contrast to the frigid air within the cavern. All around her, the aswangs waited. Watching. Crawling along the walls. Breathing in time with the bone tree, whose roots twisted with every heartbeat. Bjorn moved beside her, teeth clenched, torch flickering in his grip. The thing that wore her mother's face tilted its head and spoke again. You are not here to stop us. You're here to awaken us. Freya frowned. What are you talking about? The creature's smile deepened, and behind it, several of the aswangs began whispering. A low, rhythmic chant. The bone tree quivered. You think the mutya protects you? That the blade is your weapon, it said. But both were forged from our grief. You carry us inside you. Freya's fingers tightened on the hilt. The blade began to hum louder. Bjorn muttered, it's lying. Just trying to break you. But Freya wasn't sure. Because deep down, something had changed since she found the mutya. She didn't just see the aswangs now, she felt them. Their hunger. Their sorrow. Their memory. Their kinship. Suddenly, a cry rang out from behind. Leaf. Freya turned, heart racing. He was standing in the tunnel entrance, eyes glassy, muttering the same ancient words he'd whispered in his fever. Bjorn rushed to him. Leaf, what are you doing? But the boy didn't answer. His body moved on its own. He raised his hand. And the stone gate behind them closed, sealing off the only exit with a groan of rock. The creature laughed. He's ours now. Freya stared in horror. No, that's not possible. But the truth was already bleeding into her heart. The fever hadn't been just sickness. It had been a claim. And somehow, during those restless nights, the cold ones had taken root in Leaf. Bjorn was shouting now, banging his axe against the gate, trying to break through. But Freya remained still. Because the whispers were louder now. And this time, they came from inside her. You are the gate. You were always the gate. She gasped. Her legs gave way, and she collapsed to her knees. The mutia around her neck burned, and visions rushed through her mother burying something in the snow under the house, her father screaming, not at her, but for her, ritual circles carved in ash and sealed with blood, not to keep evil out. To keep her in. The betrayal wasn't Leaf. It was her mother. She hadn't hidden Freya to protect her. She had sealed her, bound her powers and memories, hoping she'd never awaken. And now, in this ancient hollow, the seals had cracked. You're not a hunter, the creature said. You're the key. You brought us back. No, Freya whispered. I didn't know, but the truth couldn't be denied. Every death, every nightmare, every aswang drawn to her, it hadn't been coincidence. It had been calling. Bjorn returned to her, breath ragged. The gate won't open. It's sealed with magic. Freya didn't look at him. I think I did it. He blinked. What? I'm not just cursed. I'm part of this place. I think I'm connected to them. Bjorn stared at her in silence. Then finally, what do you mean, connected? Freya looked at the bone tree. Its faces, its roots, its grief. I think the aswangs were people once. Like us. And something terrible twisted them. And my family, we were part of it. Bjorn clenched his fists. You are not one of them. But I could be. Leaf stepped forward now. He wasn't speaking anymore. Just watching. And suddenly, the creature behind the bone tree hissed, eyes narrowing. It was afraid. Freya rose slowly. You wanted me to awaken, didn't you? But now that I'm here, you're scared. The creature didn't answer. Freya stepped toward the tree. The blade in her hand burned white-hot. The mutia shone like a fallen star. You thought I'd become like you. But you forgot, I have a choice. She touched the blade to the root. And screamed. The cavern trembled. The air rippled. The tree cracked. A shockwave of energy burst outward, throwing the aswangs back. The creature shrieked, its stolen face warping, curling inward like dried bark. Bjorn grabbed Leaf, shielding him. Freya stood in the middle of the storm, every nerve on fire. But she held. Not because she was pure. Not because she was strong. But because she remembered something more powerful than magic or curses, love. The way her mother had sung to her. The way Bjorn had stood beside her. The way Leaf had clung to her hand in the dark. Not all of it had been a lie. And that was her anchor. When the light faded, the bone tree was broken. Cracked down the middle. Roots severed. The aswangs were gone. Not dead, just scattered, like smoke on the wind. Freya collapsed beside Bjorn, her body trembling. I think it's over, she whispered. But the albulario's voice echoed from the shadows. No, child. It's just begun. They turned. And behind him stood another figure, a woman in crimson robes, face veiled, holding a staff carved with the same spiral sigils. The albulario stepped aside. I taught you how to fight the hunger, he said. She will teach you how to use it. Freya stared, confusion and dread battling in her chest. Who are you? She asked the woman. The figure lifted her veil. She had Freya's face. Older. Sharper. Colder. I'm the version of you that embraced it. The cavern was quiet now. The bone tree shattered, the aswangs scattered into the night like broken shadows. But peace hadn't come. Not really. Because Freya was staring at herself. Or rather, a version of herself, a woman older, cloaked in crimson, face bearing the same scars Freya had seen in her dreams. The albulario stood between them, eyes lowered, as if even he feared the choice about to be made. You wanted to know the truth, said the other Freya. Now you have to decide what to do with it. The torchlight flickered along the stone, casting strange shadows on the walls. Bjorn held Leif behind him, glancing between the two Freyas. What is this? The older Freya stepped forward. I am what she becomes if she accepts the hunger. The power. The blood. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Her voice carried centuries of battles, regrets, and cold victories. I killed the last root of the curse, she said. But I became something else in the process. Freya's voice trembled. Why are you here? To offer you the same choice. The ground shifted beneath Freya's feet, not physically, but inside her. Everything she had endured, the isolation, the fear, the voices in the dark, it had all been leading here. This was the moment. Not a battle of blades, but of identity. The hunger inside her still whispered. Still begged. You could destroy them all, the older Freya said. Wipe out every last cursed bloodline. End it forever. Freya looked at her hands. At what cost? The older version's eyes narrowed. You think this world deserves mercy? These people hunted our kind. Burned mothers for the way they dreamt. Buried their own children alive when they feared the curse. Bjorn spoke then, voice hoarse. You're not like them, Freya. The older one turned to him. No, she's worse. Because she hesitates. The air grew heavy. Freya stepped toward her mirror self. You said you destroyed the curse. I did. But you didn't heal it. The older Freya blinked. Just for a moment. You chose vengeance, Freya said. But I don't think that's the only path. The red-robed woman scowled. Hope is a lie. No, Freya whispered. It's a risk. She turned to the albulario. Was this your plan all along? He nodded slowly. The curse was never in the blood. It was in the choice. Whether you would become devourer or healer. Freya looked down at the broken mutia in her palm, cracked, but still pulsing faintly with light. She knelt beside Leif, brushing his hair back. He's still under their influence, isn't he? Yes, the albulario said. But not lost. Then I'll save him. She rose and faced her other self. I won't become you. The older Freya narrowed her eyes. Then you'll die. Maybe, Freya said. But I'll die trying to protect, not to punish. And with that, she raised the broken mutia and pressed it to her chest. A pulse of light burst from her. The cavern split with thunder. And something ancient screamed. The final root was not in the cave. It was in her. Visions returned, her mother weeping by the river. A man cloaked in fire whispering curses over a newborn. A broken oath buried in the snow. The curse had been passed down not through blood, but through grief. Through pain never spoken aloud. And Freya now chose to speak it. I forgive you, she whispered. To her mother. To her father. To herself. The hunger recoiled. The darkness inside her convulsed. And then, it cracked. The older Freya staggered back. "What are you doing?" Ending the silence. Freya reached for Leaf and pulled him close. The boy gasped, eyes blinking clear. "Freya." She held him tight. "It's over." But the cavern rumbled again. The albulario turned, face grim. Not quite. A shadow peeled itself from the far wall, massive, horned, hollow-eyed. The first aswang. Born not from hunger, but vengeance. The ancient beast surged forward, roaring. Bjorn threw his axe, Freya raised the mutia, but the creature slammed into them like a storm. Stone cracked. Light shattered. Freya fell. Pain bloomed in her side. She looked up to see the creature rearing back, mouth open, ready to devour, when another figure leapt forward. The older Freya. "Geo," she shouted. "End it." She drove her blade deep into the beast's throat. It screamed. But not in rage. In recognition. The curse had always been one of inheritance. Now, it was breaking. Freya rose to her knees, clutching the mutia. And sang. A lullaby from her childhood. One her mother used to hum. The light returned. But this time, not harsh. Not searing. It was warm. Gentle. And it spread through the cavern, washing over every shadow, every scar, every broken oath. The creature's form faded, piece by piece. Not destroyed. But released. Set free. Silence fell. Real silence. No whispers. No wind. Just the sound of breathing. The older Freya stood in the fading light, eyes soft for the first time. "You did what I couldn't." "You helped," Freya said. A faint smile touched her mirror's lips. "Maybe we're not so different after all." She faded, her form unraveling like mist. And Freya was alone. But whole. Bjorn limped to her side, arm around Leaf. "You did it," he said. Freya nodded. "We did." The albulario bowed. "Your path will still be difficult. But now it's yours to walk." Freya looked at the open cavern, the morning light now filtering in. And for the first time, it felt like dawn. Not an end. But a beginning. The sun had finally broken through. Not just above the mountains, but inside the village. The darkness that had long pressed against the walls of their homes, their hearts, had retreated. But not without cost. Freya stood at the edge of the clearing where it all began. The old fig tree, twisted and blackened by years of quiet rot, now bore new buds, tiny, uncertain, but alive. In her hand, the cracked mutia still pulsed faintly. It would never be whole again. Neither would she. But that was all right. Wholeness, she had learned, wasn't the absence of scars. It was living despite them. The village was rebuilding. Slowly. Carefully. People whispered less now, not because they feared her, but because they respected her. The children still stared, of course. But not with dread. With curiosity. Leaf ran past her barefoot, a wooden sword in hand, chasing a pig through the grass. His laughter rang like wind chimes. He remembered nothing of the possession, the shadows, or the bone tree. Freya was glad. Let him grow into the kind of man who believed monsters were only stories. Bjorn helped thatch a roof nearby, His sleeves rolled and skin darkened from the sun. He caught her watching and offered a small wave, then tossed a bundle of hay at her with a grin. She dodged it easily. There was something unspoken between them. A closeness. Not love, not yet. But a bond forged in fear and fire. He'd stayed. That was enough. The albularia was gone. Vanished the morning after the battle. Left behind only a strip of red cloth tied to her doorpost, and a bowl of salt that never seemed to empty. Some said he returned to the sea. Others believed he had never been a man at all. Freya knew better. He had been a guide. And now she would guide others. The curse had ended with her. But echoes remained. Each full moon still brought unease. Each night wind carried fragments of memory. But Freya had found something greater than fear, purpose. She had begun writing, carving runes into bark and bone, recording the truths lost to centuries of shame. The real history. The quiet heroes. The women who'd held families together while hiding glowing eyes. The men who'd buried their own guilt to protect their sons. The children who'd dreamed of flight while chained by superstition. Their voices would not be lost again. One night, by the fire, Leaf sat beside her and asked, "Will they come back? The monsters?" Freya didn't answer right away. She looked up at the stars, bright, sharp, watching. "They never really left," she said. "But we're not alone anymore." He nodded. "Will you teach me?" She smiled softly. "Yes. But not how to fight." Leaf frowned. "Then what?" "How to see." Weeks passed. Seasons changed. And still, Freya walked the border of the forest each morning, mutia around her neck, heart strangely quiet. She no longer waited for whispers. She listened for songbirds. She no longer checked her shadow twice. She let the sun fall across her face. One evening, an old woman knocked on her door, clutching a wrapped bundle. "My granddaughter," the woman said. "She hears voices. No one will believe us." Freya took the child's hand. "I will." She became something more than a hunter, more than a healer. She became a keeper of stories. A breaker of chains passed down in silence. And when the villagers finally gave her a place among the elders, she declined. "I'm not here to lead," she said. "I'm here to listen." Years later, when Leaf had grown and sailed off to distant lands, and Bjorn's beard had turned white, and the mountains stood as they always had, a new darkness stirred beyond the sea. And people whispered again. They would come to her door by torchlight. And she would stand in the doorway, not as a warrior, but as a woman who once faced her own shadow, and chose to live. Sometimes, she still saw the older version of herself in dreams. Not angry now. Not afraid. Just watching. Proud. In the final spring of her life, Freya planted a tree beside the ruined bone altar. A fig tree. Its leaves shimmered oddly, like silver. And in the breeze, they whispered, not curses, but lullabies. Freya passed one quiet night in her sleep. No fanfare. No terror. Just peace. And in the stories that followed, people would say she had no fear. But the truth was simpler. She had known fear. And chose love anyway. Last line, she was never the end of the curse, they whispered by firelight. She was its answer.